Hi, this is Paul. A friend of mine sent me this video clip from Lex Fridman's channel on Andrew Huberman talking about prayer. And it's really a rather remarkable clip. Now, I know that a lot of Christians are going to watch this clip and find his sense of prayer and his how he conceives of God as being deficient. I know that. But what I hear here is something that's not very uncommon. In fact, to me, what this whole video clip talks about demonstrates the fact that this disenchantment reputational winter. What do I mean by that? I mean that people lose status when they speak in a more enchanted way. Let me pull up the cover at least of Charles Taylor, A Secular Age. And one of the examples of secularity that Taylor talks about is the buffered self. Now, the buffered self is immune to spiritual forces. The buffered self is sort of self-existent. There might be psychological things that connect you to the world. There might be sociological secular things. There might be cultural things, but there's no real such thing as spiritual things. All there is the self. Now, when you listen to him talk, he's very careful about trying to, as much as he can, maintain the buffered self, but there are points where he departs from it. And again, in many ways, secularity or disenchantment is propagated by social status or a loss of social status if, in fact, you act like yourself is not buffered. And what I see happening is that I sort of think about that as C.S. Lewis's Winter in Narnia with the White Witch. And for me, this little clip is all about the melting of that winter. So let's give it a listen.
I have a morning meditation that I do.
Let's give it a listen once I have the sound properly set up. Okay, let's go again.
I have a morning meditation that I do. Well, I wake up now, I get my sunlight, I hydrate, I use the bathroom, I do all the things that I talk about.
Now, I had never heard of Andrew Huberman until he had that conversation with Jordan Peterson, which I didn't even listen to. But then I heard my son talk about his stuff and his podcast, and other people in the local meetup talk about his podcast. So he's a pretty big deal in terms of giving advice to men about mental health, physical health, social health. I mean, his podcast apparently is enormous.
I've started a practice of prayer in the last year, which is new-ish for me, which is, we could talk about
in
it
the
if you want.
morning.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. And then I have a meditation that I do that actually is where I think through what the different roles that I play.
Mm-hmm.
So I start very basic. I say, okay, I'm an animal. Like we are like.
Now, part of what's interesting, what I find interesting here is sort of this monkish culthood of manhood that we see sort of pervasive in the wisdom sphere, where now with the lack of, let's say, a culture, a monastic culture, or the monastic culture was really replaced by other manhood cultures, there's very much a hunger for men to be disciplined, to be focused, to achieve. And of course, with individuals like Huberman, that seems to be very much who he is. And he'll talk about this in this clip. He's sort of naturally driven to that. And so it makes perfect sense that he will wind up going beyond just meditation. It's a fascinating point that he makes.
Is where I think through what the different roles that I play.
Mm-hmm.
So I start very basic. I say, okay, I'm an animal. Like we are like biologically animals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Human. I'm a man. I'm a scientist. I'm a teacher. I'm a friend. I'm a brother. I'm a son. I go through this. I have this list, and I think about the different roles that I have, and the roles that I still want in my life going forward, that I haven't yet fulfilled. It just.
Now, part of what's interesting is that lacking, let's say, a tradition that would give someone these things. There are many traditions in prayer, and you pick them up, little ways of prayer and discipleship programs and all of this. He sort of had to make it up because he was out there in the secular world, but it's fascinating to me that he developed it because he didn't inherit it.
Takes me, it's sort of an inventory of where I've been, where I'm at, and where I'm going, as they say. And I don't know why I do it, but I started doing it this last year. I think because it helps me understand just how many different contexts I have to exist in, and remind myself that there's still more that I haven't done that I'm excited about.
So within
And to me, it sounds like a great practice.
each of those contexts, there's like things that you want to kind of accomplish to define that.
Yeah, and I'm ambitious, so I think, I'm a brother. I have an older sister, and I love her tremendously. And I think, like, I want to be the best brother I can be to her, which means maybe a call, maybe just, we do an annual trip together for our birthdays. Our birthdays are close together. We always go to New York for our birthdays. We've gone for the last 3-4 years. Like, really, like, reminding myself of that role, not because I'll forget, but because I have all these other roles I'll get pulled into.
It's interesting also to me that he is unmarried. Now, of course, there's no crime against being unmarried. He'll refer to a romantic relationship a little bit later, but again, that's sort of, going back to my conversation with Dr. Jim, that's sort of part of the what's going on here in terms of the unattached man.
You say the first one, I'm an animal, because I have to remember that I have a body that needs care. Like any of us, I need sleep, I need food, I need hydration, I need that I'm human, that the brain of a human is marvelously complex, but also marvelously self-defeating at times. And so I'm thinking about these things in the context of the different roles. And the whole thing takes about 4 or 5 minutes. And I just find it brings me a certain amount of clarity that then allows me to ratchet into the day. The prayer piece, I think I've been reluctant to talk about until...
Right there, the reluctance to talk about it. Why? Because you'll lose status. And again, there's this great clip from Dallas Willard that's on the Veritas forum that every time I play it, I get this little note on YouTube about it, because Veritas kind of clings tightly to it. I wish Veritas would just understand that. If you've got YouTube Gold, let it run out there. But Dallas Willard walking through a university with a secular university with a young man, notices that the young man sort of edits his language with respect to enchantment. And so, yeah, of course, this isn't something. And so kudos to him for talking about it publicly. But again, to me, that shows the thawing of the winter.
Now, because I don't believe in pushing religion on people, and I think that, and I'm not, it's a highly individual thing, and I do believe that one can be an atheist and still pray, or agnostic and still pray, but for me...
And my pause isn't to say that atheists and agnostics don't pray, because I think many of them do. They just feel a little bit of dissonance when they do.
It really came about through understanding that there are certain aspects of myself that I just couldn't resolve on my own. And no matter how much therapy, no matter how much, and I haven't done a lot of it, but no matter how much plant medicine or other forms of medicine or exercise or podcasting or science or friendship or any of that, I was just not going to resolve. And so...
And I think that is a deeply rational conclusion to come to, because of all of the good things you can do for yourself, of all of the male wisdom stuff you can harvest from YouTube, of all of the books and podcasts, life is like this.
I started this because someone close to me said, a male friend said, prayer is powerful. And I said, well, how? And he said, I don't know how, but if you can it can allow you to get outside yourself, let you give up control, and at the same time take control. I don't even like saying take control, but the whole notion is that And again, forgive me, but there's no other way to say it. The whole notion is that, like God works through us, whatever God is to you, he, him, her, whatever, life force, nature, whatever it is to you, right? That it works through us. And so I do a prayer, I'll just describe it, where I ask, I make an ask to help remove my defects, my character defects. I pray to God to help remove my character defects so that I can show up better in all the roles of my life. And
That's a powerful prayer. Go to God and say, okay, Lord, show me my sin. What's your sin? It's where you missed the mark. Show it to me. He will. He will.
And do good work, which for me is learning and teaching. And so you might say, well, how is that different than a meditation? Well, I'm acknowledging that there is something that bigger than me, bigger than nature, as I understand it, that I cannot understand or control, nor do I want to. And I'm just giving over to that. Mm-hmm. And does that make me less of a scientist? I sure as hell hope not. I certainly know. There's the head of our neurosciences at Stanford until recently. You should talk to him directly about it. Bill Newsom has talked about his religious life. For me, it's really a way of getting outside myself and then understanding how I fit into this bigger picture. And the character defects part is real, right? I'm a human. I have defects. I got a lot of flaws in me, like anybody, but and trying to acknowledge them and asking for help in removing them, not magically, but through right action, through my right action. So I do that.
Not magically. We're still a little anxious about the enchantment, and through my right action. So it's sort of a, works. I wouldn't say it's works righteousness, because he certainly hasn't framed it as justification, but he's going to do the work.
That every morning. And I have to say that it's helped. It's helped a lot. It's helped me be better to myself, be better to other people. I still make mistakes, but it's becoming a bigger part of my life. And I never thought I'd talk like this. Mm-hmm. But I think it's clear to me that if we don't believe in something, again, doesn't have to be traditional standardized religion, but if we don't believe in something bigger than ourselves, we at some level will self-destruct.
That's a powerful statement. And, again, he sort of pushes back on traditional religion. Again, that's just sort of where society is at. But the truth is, if you start pursuing it, you'll say, well, even though I'm nervous about the pluralities in traditional religion, and it's very difficult to wade through the complexity of the plurality, certainly there must be a benefit to all of the not just haphazard work, but organized work that religious people have done, because this realization is not a new thing. There's a reason for thousands and thousands of years, men and women and children have been praying. And again, just as a pastor, in terms of talking to people who I meet, especially now after having this channel, what he's saying here is not in any way unusual. There are many people who feel this way, who do this one way or another. They basically just keep it quiet because they don't want to be embarrassed by it, or they don't want to lose status. So kudos to him for his courage and being willing to talk this way in a podcast. Good for you.
I really think so. It's powerful in a way that all the other stuff, meditation, all the tools is not, because it's really operating at a much deeper and bigger level. And I think that's all I can talk about it. Mostly because I'm still working out. The scientist in me wants to understand how it works, and I want to understand. And the point is to just go, there's for lack of a better language for it, there's higher power than me and what I can control. I'm giving up control on certain things, and somehow that restores a sense of agency for right action, better action.
and in some ways just sort of lift a page right out of AA there and say we're not going to forefront thousands of years of theological bickering. We are going to lean into the action, which is itself a step of faith, and invite God, even if I'm a little reluctant to believe there is one, invite God to act and in one way or another reveal some of his power to me. And, I don't see this as being wholly different from, let's say, how God and Abraham get going, as the Apostle Paul sort of works this through in the book of Romans, because now, of course, Abraham was in a very different place, all kinds of gods, not in any way a buffered self, but it seems that this one God approaches Abraham and basically says, I'm going to give you everything that you want. And I know you've been frustrated in your life because your wife is barren, and begin a relationship with me. And so therefore, the Apostle Paul in the book of Romans says, before Abraham acted with circumcision or any of these things, it was faith. And what I hear in Huberman here, am I saying his name right? I hope so, is the first flicker of faith and going to God and engaging God. And I think that is in many respects, especially if you, as an adult, that's the way you come. And he's got the wisdom and the self-knowledge to approach it. So again, good for him.
I think perhaps a part of that is just the humility that comes with acknowledging there's something bigger and more powerful than you.
And you can't control everything.
Yeah.
You go through life as a hard-driving person, forward center of mass. I remember being that way since I was little. It's like a new Legos. I'm like, I'm going to make all the Legos. So it's like on the weekends, learning about medieval weapons and then giving lectures about it in class when I was 5 or 6 years old. We're learning about tropical fish and, cataloging all of them at the store and then organizing it and making my dad drive me.
He's clearly a driven personality.
Or my mom drive me to some fish store and then spending all my time there until they throw me out, all of that. But I also remember my entire life, I would secretly pray when things were good and things weren't good. But mostly,
this does not surprise me at all. Again, it's this winter of social stigma in certain communities where I'm certainly not going to admit to anyone that I pray, but secretly people do.
When things weren't good, because it's important to pray. For me, it's important to pray each morning regardless. But when things weren't right, I couldn't make sense of them, I would secretly pray. But I felt kind of ashamed of that for whatever reason. And then it was once in college, I distinctly remember I was having a hard time with a number of things. And I took a run down to Sands Beach. It was UC Santa Barbara. And I remember I was like, I don't know if I even have the right to do this, but I'm just praying. I just prayed for the ability to be as brutally honest with myself and with other people as I possibly could be about a particular situation I was in at that time. I mean, I think now it's probably safe to say I'd gone off to college because of a high school girlfriend. Essentially, she was my family, frankly, more than my biological family was at a certain stage of life. And we'd reached a point where we were diverging, and it was incredibly painful. It was like losing everything I had. And it was like, what do I do? How do I manage this? I was ready to quit and join the fire service just to support us so that we could move forward. It's just, but praying, saying, I can't figure this out on my own. It's sort of like, I can't figure this out on my own. And how frustrating that is. And no number of friends could tell me, and inner wisdom couldn't tell me. And eventually it led me to the right answers. And she and I are friendly friends to this day. She's happily married with a child, and we're on good terms. But I think, it's a scary thing, but it's the best thing when I can't control all of this. And asking for help, I think, is also the piece. You're not asking for some magic hand to come down and take care of it. You're asking for the help to come through you, right? So that your body is used to do these.
It's okay to ask for the magic hand too. I mean, if you've taken the step to dare to talk to the creator of the universe, I mean, it's like the old story about the king. The king has a servant, and the king invites the servant, someone who he favors, and says, ask what you will. But ask a kingly sized thing. Don't ask for just a little thing, because in a sense, if you ask for something massive, you praise me because I'm that large. So, okay, through you, that's fine. But, maybe get a little bolder and ask for a big thing. Now, it might not come. He might say no, which is absolutely the right of the king. But you honor the king by asking for a king-sized request. So, don't, if you build that relationship, own it.
Right works, right action.
Isn't it interesting that this secret thing that you're almost embarrassed by that you did it as a child is something you...
Oh, man.
It's another thing you do as you get older, is you realize like those things are part of you and it's actually a beautiful thing.
Yeah. A lot of the content of the podcast is, deep academic content, and we talk about everything from, eating disorders to bipolar disorder to depression, a lot of different topics, but the tools are the protocols, as we say, right? The sunlight viewing and all the rest. A lot of that stuff is just stuff I wish I had known when I was in graduate school. If I'd known to go outside every once in a while and get some sunlight, not just stay in the lab, I would have, I might not have hit a really tough round of depression when I was a postdoc and working twice as hard. And when my body would break down or I'd get sick a lot, I don't get sick much anymore. Occasionally, about once every 18.
And again, I don't know him much, but his path sounds very interesting because he had to look out for wisdom because obviously he was living in an unwise way that our culture sort of tempts people into.
18 months to 2 years, I'll get something, but I used to break my foot skateboarding all the time. I couldn't understand what's wrong with my body. I'm getting injured. I can't do what everyone else can. Now I developed more slowly. I had a long arc of puberty. So that was part of it. I was still developing, but how to get your body stronger, how to build endurance. Like no one told me. The information wasn't there. So a lot of what I put out there is the information that I wish I had, because once I had it, I was like, wow, like A, this stuff really works. B, it's grounded in something real. Sometimes certain protocols are a combination of, animal and human studies, sometimes clinical trials, sometimes there's some mechanistic conjecture for some, not all. I always make clear which. But in the end, like figuring out how things work so that we can be happier, healthier, more productive, suffer less, like reduce the suffering of the world. And I think that, well, I'll just say thank you and for asking about the prayer piece. Again, I'm not pushing or even encouraging it on anyone. I've just found it to be tremendously useful for me.
Wow. So I thought it was a super interesting video, and it'll be interesting to see where he goes with this. So yeah, just a little short video. Leave a comment.